Welcome into the Stack Shack Sports Show. Today, we're going to be going through all the new head coaching hires and especially focusing on some notable exceptions, right? We had some coaches, hot names at the beginning of the search and then disappearing. CBS Sports came out with their grades for them. I'm going to react to them a little bit and give my thoughts. So, starting off, kind of the biggest name was Jim Harbaugh. He was the number one kind of option for people to get. He goes to the Chargers. I said this was a perfect fit. Jim Harbaugh, really, he gets the notion that, oh, they're a Midwest family. You know, he's coaching in Michigan. He went to Michigan for college. His brother, his dad. But Jim's different. Jim is really a West Coast person, really a California person, right? Was at San Diego, was at Stanford, was at the 49ers. Now he's back in LA with the Chargers. So I think this was the perfect hire for the Chargers. You get Justin Herbert, finally a legitimate coach. Very, very excited. Some people are worried. You know, it's been a long time, 9 years or so since he's been in the NFL. Will he be able to pick up speed? Is this going to be an Urban Meyer situation, right? College coach coming to the NFL. Jim's a very different cat than Urban. Jim has had success in the NFL. I think he's going to continue to have success. Very, very excited for the Chargers. CBS Sports, I think, gave this a grade of an A. I wholeheartedly agree with them. I think this was the best hire. He was the most obvious choice to the most obvious destination. The best job. He's got a good quarterback. He's got some pieces. We'll have to see how the contracts work out. Will they be able to keep, Eckler, Keenan Allen, etc.? There's rumors right now of Saquon Barkley potentially wanting to go to the Chargers. Maybe they let Eckler walk, bring on Saquon. I don't love Saquon's price tag, so if they can get him a little cheaper, sure. But, we'll have to see how that works out. But I think they are a dangerous team next year. Schedule also looks really, really good. If you haven't seen their schedule, go look it up. A lot of easy wins. A lot of easy wins on that schedule. I project probably a playoff team, but we'll have to wait and see how the draft and how free agency goes. Once I know the contracts, once the rosters are set, I think they'll be good. I do. I think they'll be good. Commanders. So this was the most recent one. This was the last hire to happen. This is the one that we talked earlier in this week. I said this was the last shot, obviously, for Bill Belichick, but I did think it was one of the jobs that made the most sense for him, even though he wouldn't have been my pick. Apparently, the Commanders agreed with me. He was not their pick. He apparently did want the job, but they decided to go with Dan Quinn, Cowboys defensive coordinator. He's had a couple of good years with the Cowboys. The last game wasn't great. Jordan Love kind of carved him up a little bit. So, he's been a head coach before, a Super Bowl head coach before. Definitely has a good resume. I think at the end of the day, they said, I'd much rather work with Dan Quinn than Bill Belichick. And that's what I wanted to talk about and pause here as we're going through. Bill Belichick does not get a job, which is kind of the glaring, obvious, big shocker, right? Pete Carroll, he went into that kind of advisory role, said he still might want to coach, but he still has a job, right? Vrabel's the other big one. I thought for sure Vrabel would go somewhere, but he ended up not going anywhere. I think some people are going to regret that. I think the Titans are going to regret getting rid of Vrabel. They bring in Callahan, which we'll talk about in a minute, but that one surprised me. But the Bill Belichick, a lot of people consider him one of the greatest coaches, if not the greatest coach of all time, and he gets let go from New England, apparently really wanted some jobs, interviewed extensively with the Falcons, reportedly was interested in the Commanders' job, and he doesn't get them. They go with Dan Quinn over Bill Belichick. If you would have asked someone, 5 years ago, who you taking, Dan Quinn or Bill Belichick? I think pretty much everybody would have said Bill Belichick. Right now, we've come to realize Bill has a track record now. If he wants full personnel control, which according to all the reports I've read, he does. He wants control over personnel. That's not a good sign. We saw what's happened in the last few years in New England. It's been bad. I'm sorry, Bill. I wish you the best in life. But you're just completely out of touch with today's NFL, with today's players, with today's coaches. He's just completely narcissistic at this point. It's Bill's way or the highway, and I just can't get around it. Maybe he fits in a place like Philadelphia where they have a very strong GM who's not going to give power up, and if Bill can respect that, I think Bill is still a great defensive coach, but offensively, terrible. Personnel, drafting, I mean, the dude drafted, 2 kickers last year or something like that? Guards and kickers is what he's drafting. Are you kidding me? He hasn't had a Pro Bowl skill position player in a billion years. Since Tom Brady leaves, the offense has been absolutely atrocious. Now, I'm not saying Mac Jones is the greatest quarterback out there, but it's been really, really bad. Reports this week, he just stopped talking to Matt Jones after, week 12. Yeah, that's great. You're young quarterback, you're trying to, give an option. You've drafted 0 wide receiver help for him that has worked out. Absolutely terrible offense. You gave him a defensive coordinator as an offensive coordinator the other week, and now you're just not talking to him. Because I don't know. Who do you want to start instead of Mac Jones? Are you kidding me? Absolutely childish behavior from Bill Belichick. I can see why he didn't get a job. I can. Dan Quinn, better hire than Bill Belichick. CBS Sports gives it a D+. They're not real happy with this. I'll be honest, I don't think it's the best hire. He wasn't necessarily the best option out there, but at the time they hired him, once Ben Johnson said no, a lot of the other kid candidates have been, kind of picked up, right? McDonald was pretty much a shoo-in at Seattle. You had some of the other offensive guys already moving on. Ben Johnson's now off the market. There weren't a lot of options left for the Commanders head coach. I personally probably would have gone Vrabel over Dan Quinn, but maybe they like Dan Quinn a little bit better. Maybe he's a little cheaper. I don't know. We'll see. It's very interesting. Dan Quinn reportedly going to be taking some of his staff from the Dallas Cowboys over. And then there's rumors now today, Ron Rivera, the coach he's replacing, who was let go by the Commanders, by Washington, might become the Cowboys defensive coordinator. So a little bit of a coach swap happening here. It's kind of fun. Here, you get our defensive coordinator. We'll take your head coach and make him our defensive coordinator. Kind of an interesting swap there. Will be very exciting, I think, to see how that all plays out in division. This rivalry is going to get a little spicy, I think. I really do. I think it's going to be a bit spicy. So the Falcons, this was early the landing spot for Bill Belichick. Raheem Morris ends up getting this position. I think he's done a great job with the Rams defense the last year or two here, especially as they've gotten older, as they've gotten less talented. I think he's kind of gotten the most out of his players, which is what you want to see. He has a coaching background with Atlanta. He even was actually their interim head coach after they fired Dan Quinn, right? Kind of interesting. Seeing some of these names popping up a lot. Here you go. You're giving him a shot at it. I think this was a situation where they, kind of went with the safer option. Bill reportedly really wanted this job, interviewed for it twice, and then they went with Raheem Morris. I think at the end of the day, it was, we can work with Raheem Morris. Not sure if we can work with Bill Belichick. That's where it works out to be. Hopefully he'll do well. I want all these guys to do well. Wish no ills on any of them. I think he's going to be okay. He definitely has some weapons on offense. They just got to figure out the quarterback situation. We'll have to see. He did poach Zach Robinson from Los Angeles, so he brings over an assistant as well. And, little older now. Give him another crack at it. Really well liked by players, it seems. So I think this is a pretty decent hire. We'll give it a B. Dave Cannells. This was probably one of the more underrated hires, in my opinion. You have a situation where the Panthers owner is absolutely wild. He has been firing coaches like crazy, right? And, some people say it's one of the best jobs in the NFL because you go and you work for a year and you get a 6-year contract. It's pretty great. David Tepper is a little wild. Not a lot of people want to go to Carolina because they're afraid they're just going to get fired after a few weeks, right? Or after the first season. He doesn't really seem to give them a long lead. I hope he gives Dave Cannells an opportunity. But I do think Dave Cannells was an absolutely amazing hire. He is now in back-to-back seasons turned around the careers of Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield. Two formerly fairly high draft picks had kind of fallen by the wayside, completely resurrects both of their careers, and now they pair him up with Bryce Young, who is very much that trajectory. He was on the trajectory of the Baker Mayfield. A bunch of coaches, a bunch of different offensive coordinators in the same years. Probably going to fall by the wayside once the first overall draft pick, right? So I think that he's the perfect fit for Carolina. Really looking around the league, I almost feel like Carolina got their best option. Even though, people like Jim Harbaugh probably would have never considered the Carolina job, I think Dave Cannells is a better fit in Carolina than even Jim Harbaugh would have been. He's a quarterback whisperer. That's who he works with. That's what they have in Carolina. At least, I have to give David Tepper credit. At least he went and found somebody specifically to try and help his first overall draft pick, Bryce Young. I got to give him credit for that. I think this is a massive hire, an absolutely fantastic hire. CBS Sports somewhat agrees with me. For the fit, I almost think it is just as good as the Jim Harbaugh hire. I'd give this an A as well. Gerard Mayo goes to the Patriots, filling in now for Bill Belichick gone. This is just an absolutely terrible job from a personnel standpoint. He really doesn't have a lot to work with on that offense. Really tough situation for him. I wish him the best. He seems to be very well liked in the locker room. I'm excited for him. I think he's a good hire. He's a Patriot, right? One of the few people that I think will do okay following a legend in Bill Belichick, but I don't expect much from New England. So as a coaching hire, I think he's okay. Doesn't obviously have a lot of experience as a head coach or anything like that, but he's kind of one of the few fits that I think would work. Vrabel was another option in this scenario. I think Vrabel would have been a little bit better hire, but Gerard Mayo's really well liked in the building, and so let's give him a shot. Love to see him getting a shot, but man, he's got a really tough position. I don't expect the Patriots to be very good next year. Hopefully Kraft doesn't get real antsy and start firing coaches, because this is a serious rebuild he's needing to take on, and we got to give him some time to have an opportunity to do that. Seems to be much more collaborative, talking about how he's going to use the scouts. He's not taking over personnel. I think this is going to finally give the Patriot staff a little bit more room, a little breathing room, and time to shine, for sure. Antonio Pierce. This is my favorite hire outside of Jim Harbaugh, by far. And this hire, to me, gets better every single day. So first of all, Mark Davis decided not to once again fire a very productive interim head coach. Okay? We had one previously. Antonio Pierce, loved in the locker room. Absolutely, you can see a difference from when Josh got let go and Antonio Pierce came and took it over as the interim head coach. The Raiders were a different team. Were they great? Did they make the playoffs? No. But you can see attitude and effort. The culture in that locker room completely changed. It completely improved. Everyone likes this guy. And I do too. I think he's fantastic. There might be pushback from people around the league that all talk about this whole defensive coach thing, right? Antonio Pierce is going to be the CEO type leader, a culture guy. And I think he will work fantastically well. And you can already see it happening. He gets hired, and what are the first couple things he does? He's a first-time head coach, true head coach. He's been an interim head coach last season, right? First time true head coach. So what does he do? Well, the first hire he makes that's a big hire that we talk about is he brings on Marvin Lewis. Now, as a Bengals fan, I can tell you Marvin Lewis is not my favorite coach ever, right? Was not great. Struggled to get into the playoffs, struggled to control his team. I always felt Marvin's cultures weren't that great. I have no problem with the culture in Las Vegas with Antonio Pierce at the head. He's going to get the culture side of things right. The locker room should be solid under his leadership. So I don't need Marvin Lewis for that. But what you can bring Marvin Lewis in for is fantastic coaching experience. I mean, there's not many other people that have been a head coach in the league for as many years as Marvin Lewis has. Up until Marvin Lewis was fired in Cincinnati, the longest tenured head coaches were Bill Belichick, Mike Tomlin, and Marvin Lewis, right? I think Lewis had more years at that time than even Tomlin did, right? He has been in the NFL head coaching for a very long time and is the perfect person to bring on as an advisor, as an assistant, to help the head coaching transition, because it is taking on a lot of new stuff, right? And it's different than being an intern. This is why a lot of interns don't work super great. You get thrust into it in the middle of the season. You kind of just like got to take over and make do with what you got. Okay, it's a lot of just passion, rah. Now you're the head coach. Now you really do make all of the decisions in the off season, right? Now you do have to handle and prepare OTAs and training camp and all of this stuff. Marvin Lewis is going to help significantly with that. I think it's a great pickup for Antonio Pierce to bring on somebody very experienced to be a great, whisperer in his ear to say, hey, I got a little advice. Hey, this didn't work for me. This did work for me. Really help him, a guy to bounce things off of. Then, what is the next hire he makes? Cliff Kingsbury. Probably the most sought-after offensive coordinator in this entire coaching strategy. He's a defensive guy, and this is what it tells me when he hires Cliff Kingsbury. Pierce goes, I know where my weaknesses are. It's inexperience in being in this position, so I'm going to hire a very experienced assistant in Marvin Lewis. And I'm a defensive guy. I'm not an offensive guy. So I'm going to go grab a very experienced offensive coordinator. Someone who's been in a head coach in this league as well. Fantastic hires. It shows a great amount of self-awareness, something that Bill Belichick and other coaches that are maybe not getting jobs right now haven't shown, and a criticism we've had of, the defensive coaches maybe not really understanding the offensive side of the ball real well, or having bad offenses. He knows where his experience is lacking. Not a lot of head coaching experience. I was just an intern, and I'm not an offensive person. So what am I going to do? My first two hires are going to address both of those. Get somebody in the building with a lot of head coaching experience, and somebody with a ton of offensive coaching experience. And you can say what you want about Cliff Kingsbury and how things ended in Arizona. It wasn't pretty, but he's also dealing with Kyler Murray, and it's not like Arizona has been fantastic since they fired Cliff Kingsbury, right? So, fantastic hire. I am super, super high on this as a head coaching job. I think nobody's talking about this the way they need to be. Everybody's focusing on Harbaugh. They're focusing on Mike McDonald. They're focusing on Dan Quinn, on these other hires. Antonio Pierce is the one. Quiet. Happened early on, and he's building an awesome staff. Watch out for the Raiders next season. They still need a quarterback, obviously. Is Jimmy G going to be healthy? What's going to be the situation there? They need help. They're not going to be a Super Bowl team next year, I don't think. But I think something's building in Las Vegas, and hopefully Mark Davis will give him enough time. He gave McDaniels a couple of years there. He has been patient in the past. I think he's, a reasonable owner, and I was very happy to see that he didn't, throw all of the recommendations of his players out the window and, go for another big splash kind of head coach, and instead hire somebody who I think really deserves a position and is going to do a fantastic job. Brian Callahan to the Titans. I don't think the Titans should have fired Vrabel. That's my opinion. Is Callahan the perfect connection? Okay. He's worked with some great quarterbacks. Peyton Manning, Matt Stafford, Joe Burrow. He's been the Bengals offensive coordinator, made it to a Super Bowl as an offensive coordinator. But a lot of people in the Bengals organization will be quick to tell you, Zach Taylor's the offensive guy. Right? Zach Taylor's very involved as the offensive side of the ball in the Bengals room. That's why they hired him. How much has Bill Callahan done? I don't know if it's been great. Jake Browning had a great year this year, so got to give him some credit for that. Have him work with Will Levis, see how they do this season. But I think they're going to regret firing Mike Vrabel. I wish Brian Callahan the best, but I just don't see him as an A-plus prospect, and I see Vrabel as a better prospect than Callahan. Seahawks get Mike McDonald. Mike McDonald's been on a heater recently, right? The Baltimore Ravens defense was fantastic. Kind of resurrected some people's careers, like Roquan Smith. We were kind of wondering, was he really that great? And then, yes, he was, right? The rise of Kyle Hamilton. He's great. He's super young. Comes into Seattle. I think he's going to work really well with that defense. What Seattle does on offense, I don't know. And I don't know what his kind of situation is going to be from an offensive coordinator perspective necessarily, or whether they're going to move up in the draft and try and get a quarterback. I think they might need to. But I do think he's a great fit in Seattle to come in and work with that young, athletic, aggressive defense that Pete Carroll started to put together. Is he better than Pete Carroll? I think he's just younger than Pete Carroll. And I think they wanted to take a shot. I think they felt that maybe Pete, he'd been there for a while. He's getting older. They wanted to have maybe a bit of a succession plan. Maybe this was a good opportunity to say, all right, Pete, come into the advisory role. Come up into the upper management, so to speak. We're going to bring in a young guy to run the day-to-day. I think Mike McDonald's a good hire. He is young. We'll have to see. He does have a lot of experience in both college and NFL, has led and built some great defenses in the last couple of years. I think he's just a B hire. He's good. He's fine. It's a fine hire. I think he's a reasonable replacement for Pete Carroll, and so looking forward to seeing what Seattle can do. And that's it. That's every single coaching hire. Obviously, the big surprises are that Vrabel and Bill Belichick don't have jobs. Kind of weird to see neither of them coaching next season. We'll see how the season progresses. There might be some quick firings. Who knows? There's a lot of projections of potential hot seat coaches next year. I mean, McCarthy doesn't have a contract after next year, so Dallas job might be opening up. There's a lot of interesting jobs opening up next year that I think both Vrabel and Belichick will have a shot at. But, let me know down below who your favorite hire was. I think my favorite hire is Jim Harbaugh for the Chargers. I think it's a perfect fit. But I think equally, and the one that people aren't talking about, is Antonio Pierce in Las Vegas. I think that was an A-plus, fantastic hire. I cannot wait to see how the Vegas Raiders and the Los Angeles Chargers grow and develop as we watch the next couple of seasons. Let me know down below who your favorite hire was, and we'll see you next week.